Hello and welcome back after the short coffee break. We hope you enjoyed your coffee, or if you're still drinking the coffee that is next to your computer, then you can freely continue to doing so. And let's listen to the same speaker, Richard. We had more questions during the break, so let's take them after the presentation. But this time, Richard is going to talk about using M language for data transformation in Power BI. We will make sure that your data helps you building your reports. We're going to go through a quick overview of rookie mistakes to avoid, building rigid queries, and combining data effectively. Richard, the floor is yours again. Sending you live.
Thank you. So welcome back. I'll immediately start by sharing my screen. So what we will do, we will go through the presentation, and then if time permits, I will show you just one simple example on how to do this. So in terms of M language, so you have to understand that M language, first of all, is super easy language to do the basics. But if you want to go advanced, then it takes a bit more learning. But what I'll do, I'll try to still keep it simple for you, and at the same time make sure that whatever you do, you make sure that the data that you build is very strong, has a strong foundation. And I think those who have previous experience with M language at Power Query, you know that one of the typical things that people do is when you click refresh, then suddenly some data has changed, your queries break. So it's just like with macros, you spend a lot of time fixing the query language, fixing your queries, than actually using the benefits out of them. And what I'll try to show you is typical principles, what you can do to make sure that this is not the case. And actually, when you use your M language, then it has, whenever you build the queries, they're very powerful, very strong, and they're able actually to be actually very withstanding different changes that are happening whenever new data comes in. So what I'll start with is typical database rules. So there are 5 database rules that I adhere to, and actually these rules can help you to build the database build report. So this is the foundation of the database, and they're quite simple rules. So the first thing is withdraw context. So you remove duplicates. Any data that is duplicating for you, I would suggest you to remove that. And something is simple, but let's say you have your months, and then you have your yearly summary inside the database. So in this case, I would remove that yearly summary because I can achieve the same result by just selecting all of these 12 months. Or no, I have my product sales and I have my company sales. I would not show the company sales because if I sum up all the products, I'll get to that company. The second thing is I remove any redundancy. So these are unneeded columns. And in many cases, when we connect to any database, there are a lot of either legacy columns or columns that are not pertain to this report. So I'd rather remove them because, first of all, it's easier than to navigate. Then you don't have that much clutter. And it's actually much easier than whenever you build them, because if you remove them from early on in the stage, you don't have to actually drag them through the whole process. The third thing that I look through is I try to split columns as much as possible. And what I mean by that is that you can actually gain new perspective. So let's say you have a column which states your product name, and that product name includes what is its container, what's its size, and what is the brand, and then the taste. So instead of just having this one product column, if I split that into this taste, size, container, and the brand, I'm allowing myself to actually improve my database quality because I can now analyze it by containers, by size, by taste, or by brand. And this actually, what I try to achieve whenever I build database, I try to make sure that I have as many perspectives, as many ways of slicing the data as possible, because once you add new perspective, you can have actually a new lens how you look through data, and you can actually find maybe some good insights or some correlations or some patterns that you would previously not see. Then the next rule that I look for is something that's maybe not that easy to understand at the very beginning, but actually it helps you a lot, especially if you're building these databases for somebody else to use later in the later stage. So what I do is I only use aggregate columns in my database. So for example, if I would have profit margin in my database, I would actually remove that. But I remove it under these two conditions. So first of all, I look if I can create this profit margin based on my initial data that I have. So if I have, for example, revenue and profits, and then I have profit margin, I would simply remove that profit margin from my database, and I would create that later when I create this DAX queries. So yeah, DAX formulas. But if it's not there, then I can do two more steps. One of them is I can check if I can create that weighted average, because the problem is whenever you keep this profit margin, for example, in your columns, this is something that's not aggregated columns. If you sum them up, if you sum profit margins, they don't make any sense. They only make sense if I look at the number of total revenue and total profit within whatever aggregation that I've selected. And if not, then people can actually use that and they will get the wrong information. And of course, arithmetic average does not work because it will simply also be wrong data for you. So either I indicate that this can only be used on per row level. So for example, if I have a certain specific API that's only available per row level, then I would indicate that in the name. And I would even create it with DAX warning that if it's not one row is not selected, then I would not even allow that to show this number. Or what I can do, I can find what is the weighted average mechanism behind it. Maybe it could be volume or profits or general monetary units. And I would combine that together so that I can create this weighted average formula. So just make sure that whenever you have your database, the numbers, when you aggregate them, they do make sense. If they don't make sense, then try to not include them, or at least indicate that they can only be used per row level. And lastly, this is just a simple thing. It's, you have to set data type for all columns. So if you don't set data types, then, you practically cannot use them inside Power BI. Then I will go through the typical 10 rookie mistakes that people do, and actually how you can actually help you build rigid queries. The first thing that you should do is you have to be careful with these auto-generated steps. So usually the typical auto-generated step is this change type. For me, change type is one of the worst query functions that you can have, because what it will do, it will expose all of your column headers. And if some of the column headers do change whenever you update your report, then of course the query will break, because it will not find, for example, that same name or that same column inside your data. So what you have to do, you have to remove them. And with change type, I always add it as the very last step. So when I have finished everything that I wanted to do in my database, this is only the time when I add my change type, because then I know that these are the columns that I really need with the right names that I've already pre-identified. And only then I add this change type, because previously there are very, very few cases when you would have to previously use a specific change type. Sometimes I use it for if I need to have date and then do some changes with the dates. But usually the change type would be my last step. Then another mistake is that people do is they don't use this column profile or column distribution to understand the data. So this is a relatively new feature. It was, I think, at the end of the last year when it was introduced, where you can click on the view for the queries, and you can also see how your column, how much data is valid or errors or empty, then how distributed are each values. And actually, that can help you to understand your data. And typically what you can do it by default, it shows you for the first 1,000 rows, but you can have it for your entire data set. And this can help you to find some outliers, or if you have some mistake, for example, you expect to have all unique columns, but it shows that some of them are not unique. Then you know that, okay, this is something that I need to investigate, and then I can check why is that. The fourth thing is you have to remove these hard-coded filters. So typically when you click on a filter button, like normally in Excel, you select specific values that you would like to keep or remove. Instead, you need to make sure that it's either you add text filters or value filters, for example, which is contains or is not equal and so forth. Why is that? It's simply because if you use hard-coded filters, let's say there's a new case that comes in and you have not filtered this specific case out, this new product segment, for example, or what have you, and it will be contained because you said you just had hard-coded filters, which only applies to certain values. So using these filters as a like text or value filters is just a must, and you would always have to do them in your queries. The fifth step is this dilemma between removing columns or choosing columns, because you can do one or the other. And now you have to think in terms of your database, what is more beneficial, because if you remove certain columns, then what will happen if if you remove certain columns, but when you refresh your data, a new column comes in, then these new columns will be added because you have not specifically removed them. Or vice versa, if you use choosing columns, you choose the columns that you want, and if new columns appear, they will not be added in your database because you have not chosen them. So I personally use much more this choosing columns than removing columns, simply because it can actually help me to just select the data that I really need from my database. And the last simple rookie mistake that you can do is to make sure your text is in a uniform way. I usually use under transform this trim and text format, where I can ensure that my data is consistent. For example, there's no double spacing, or there's no caps sensitive mistakes, because Power Query is cap sensitive, so you have to make sure that your data is precisely there. And this actually can help you to remove most of the problems with just trimming and making sure that your data format is consistent, for example, either lowercase or uppercase or what have you. And then there are three advanced cases, which are not maybe that easy to use for a beginner in terms of Power Query and language, but actually they are really helpful. So one of the things you can do, for example, especially if you want to reorder columns, I would not suggest you to do these reordered columns, but if you do them, then of course it will also once again expose all of your column headers. And what you can do, you can write this missing field ignore or missing field use null. So what happens if you have previously said that you have these columns, but for some reason this column is not there this time, and when you refresh the data, it would break your query. But if you write missing field ignore, it will simply ignore that. It will say, okay, this is not there, but it's fine because I just ignore it. Or if you write missing field use null, it will still maintain this column header, but it will just add nulls there because there's no data inside it. And for even more advanced users, you can exploit these list functions, especially if you have your database that is changing column names. There are a lot of columns that are added or taken out. If you use list and then there are a lot of functions there, they can actually help. Or you can use this zero table where you can just add all the columns that you need, and you can make that and you can append that to your main table. So you can make sure that all the columns that you need are there in the beginning. But these are quite advanced cases then, and not all of the times you would not need to use them. The second thing is when you split or merge columns, there are these auto-generated formulas, and once again, I would like to I'll usually update them with using either this missing field ignore or use null, and also change the header names. And lastly, when you expand table contents, what usually is when you merge some queries and you expand these table contents, what usually people do, they select all the columns that they need, or say, I would just like to expand all of the columns. But what Power Query does, it just remembers the column names. And if you would like to remember if there are new column names that will be appearing in the future, then I would use this list transform or list union to make sure that all of even there are new column names that are appearing, then when I expand table, it will be added there. Then the next thing that I would like to go through is the way how you can combine data, because when you combine data, this is one of the most powerful things that you can do in Power Query. And I will show you an example. There are just 7 simple steps how you can combine data from multiple sources. So let's say that's either a file or a sheet or a web page. So if you want to, for example, take a web page and you can like to take multiple pages of those web pages, let's say it's different product names or just different pages of the report. You have a list of products there or a list of any information, and you would like to have multiple pages automatically combined. So the first thing you do is you just select the web page that you would like to get, take this URL. Then the second thing, what you do when you connect to that web page, you have to first of all create a perfect database from the sample file, so the first page that you created. What I mean by perfect database, it means that will be a database that will be already good enough for you to be used if you would just have this one page. Once you do this, once you create this one database of this one page, now we will need to select these 5 steps to make sure that we can actually combine multiple pages. So one of the things you need to do is you need to create a parameter. And the parameter, maybe if you know this is this, you can create a new parameter, and this is the changing part of the file. So it's either it can be a sheet name or a web page or web page number. So usually it can be web page number or maybe a product name. So you just create a parameter which tells you that this is the web page name. And then what you do when you create this parameter, you have to link this parameter with your sample data, the one that you created. Usually that's under source if it's web page or file on the source step, or in navigation step for sheets. So what you do, instead of having this page 1, you add your parameter name. Once you do that, you simply can create this function of the sample data. So you can right click on your sample data and you can create function. Once you do that, they should automatically create a new folder with these 3 elements together. One is the sample file, then the formula, and lastly the function itself. And the last 2 steps is, first of all, you need to create this master table. I just call it as a master table, where you add all of the parameter names. So it can be these pages that you want to use, or product names, or sheet names. You just add them just as names and make sure that there is text. And lastly, you just invoke this custom function using this function that you just created. What I'll do, I think I'll show you how, in the last moment, I'll just show you how does that look for you to understand. So I'll end show, and hopefully you can see the, I'll try to share once again this, I think the Power BI report. So here, so hopefully you can see that.
Just a second, testing, connecting. Yes, we do.
Yeah, so this is the combination, how it looks like. I'm sorry that it's in Latvian, but I'll just explain you these 7 steps. So the first step that I did is I create this database that I have. So for example, this is just my source from my web page. So here I have this web page that I've selected. Then the second thing that I do is I create this parameter, which is just a page number in my case. So it's page 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Once I do this, then I go to the source of this sample data, and I just add inside this formula bar, instead of just having page number 2, for example, I just add here this page number, this name here, that is this parameter name. Once you do that, you click enter, nothing will happen. But what you do need to do is then you do right click and you create function. So when I create this function, so this is my function that I've just created. So it will just use this, whatever steps are there, it will just add them here. And lastly, what I do, I create a new table. In my case, the source is these multiple page names that I've selected. And I simply invoke function. So you go to add column and invoke custom function. So once you invoke this custom function, you will use this get data and your page number as your elements. So here, this function is this get data, and page number is this page number here. And once you do that, you can expand that table. And once you expand it, you have all of the pages in your database ready to be used. So you have all of your data that's there. And you can, this is how you can easily combine multiple pages from the web. So yeah, that will be about it. I think already time is running short, so I'll be open for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Richard. The first question was asked in the break. So in your opinion, what are the main advantages of Power BI against other reporting tools, against Tableau, SAP Business Objects, and such?
Okay. Well, I usually also have posed that question whenever I'm with a client, and it comes down to, for me, to 2 main things. The first thing is that Power BI has a very strong community, and it has these monthly updates. So whenever there's a new issue or a new idea that wants to be posted, usually that's already added inside the forum, and in a couple of months you already see that change. So there are a lot of features that are there. And second, what I like about Power BI is this AI functionalities. So for example, they have this either Q&A, the composition tree, this Azure machine learning abilities, even Power Query machine learning that's there added. So the AI capabilities actually allows you to analyze data in a much more powerful way than any other tool that's out there, because all of the other functionalities, they're similar. The only thing where I like about Tableau is maybe that their visuals look much more professional by default, but still, I think in Power BI, you can also create very professionally created reports if you want to.
Okay, thank you. The next one is that, and the question asker asks, I understand that sometimes N language cannot be avoided when joining multiple sources, but sometimes it can be avoided. I'm wondering how performance differs transforming data in the M step versus transforming data already in the database connection stage before data even reaches M.
Okay. So that's a good question. It depends on what type of data you have. It's either import or direct query. If you have import solution, then whenever you refresh data, it's already loaded in, so all of the query steps are done. So I would say you can even keep them inside Power Query when you do this regular import, because whenever you refresh, the data is refreshed. It takes maybe some time to refresh, but then people just use that, and it's only the DAX part that is then being executed. But if it's a direct query, then usually I would go with SQL, for example, because it is sometimes more powerful. When you do this SQL, and then you add everything inside the data source, and then you just pass through already ready-made database that is then using any DAX formulas. So it depends on your query connection. And of course, it depends on how quickly you can achieve your result. So if it takes you half a year, then I would maybe go for Power Query even transformations sometimes.
Okay, thank you. Next one. I know that there are a lot of resources available about M, but what would you recommend to look for in a good starting guide? Previously, you touched upon some resources, but if you just started to read and learn about M, where would you guide us?
Okay. I think the same resources can help. For example, this guy in a cube. There's a good book that's called M is for Data Monkey. So this is just about Power Query. Then there's also the Straticat.com. They have a book that's called free ebook that you can have, which is called Power BI from Rookie to Rockstar. And you can actually get that if you just subscribe to their email list. And it's actually very comprehensive, any step that you want to go through. But I would go with just regularly YouTube. Just go through YouTube, and then that will be just the easiest way to learn.
How would you then, maybe on YouTube, do you have especially favorite channels, or how do you know that the videos are of nice quality and such?
Well, I think this guy in the cube has very high quality videos, the same as Microsoft Power BI as their official channel. But if you would write, you can see by the number of views. I mean, if there are a lot of people who are watching, that means it's just good. It should be a good video.
Views and the likes and dislikes radio.
Yeah, exactly. That will be like any other topic that you would look at if you don't know anything about it.
Okay, but yes, what the attendees of bootcamp can know is that there's a Power BI official Microsoft channel on YouTube, so that might be a nice tool. Good. Next question: if I have a CSV from a web connected as my data source, is there a way to make the data automatically refresh? Because right now it seems that I have to update the column count in advanced editor manually. So CSV from web, but can it be refreshed?
Yeah. Yes. So there are two options. One of them is you can have a scheduled refresh. I have not tested the scheduled refresh with CSV, but the other option is this called Power Automate. Maybe you know Microsoft has Power Automate suite, which previously was called Microsoft Flow. And actually what it can do, it can actually automatically do certain functions based on a trigger. Let's say it can check every 5 seconds if a CSV file is updated, like number count. It will check. If it's updated, then it will automatically refresh your Power BI. You can check in Power Automate. It's actually very simple to build and simple to use. So if you want to do this in this way.
Okay, thank you. As I'm listening to you present and answer the questions and suggest tons of sources where you learn for information, and you mentioned that once monthly there's an update. And the question is then, once you start working with clients, some of the clients specialists, they might start using the tools and languages that you use, but how much time do they then now have to attribute to learn all the updates and new developments? Because it seems that it's another full-time job.
Well, it's not that hard, because if you know the basics already by now, if I would teach anyone Power BI, I think in a year time you can just have a look at major features and it will be going to be good enough if you're just a regular Power user. So if you're not as a consultant, so you don't have to learn that every time, because if you would do certain things, there might be just a better way how you can do these things. That's as simple as that now. So you should not be worried about that.
So if you're not a consultant but an in-house specialist, you shouldn't be worried about how much time new updates and new things require time teaching and learning.
Yeah, exactly. You can just check it once a year. That will be already enough for you.
Okay, that is good news. Thank you. Just a question arrived. Yes, we're going to ask this question. So, aren't books on DAX and Power BI a risky investment? Power BI desktop and DAX constantly update. Videos, in my opinion, are a better source for education. Can you comment on books versus videos?
Okay. Personally, what I like about certain books is that they give you very good foundation, especially if they're from very well-known and respectable sources. But personally, there are just very few books like that, and usually the main message that I really get is from videos, especially with such tool like Power BI.
Okay.
So I would not bet on books in general.
Not bet on books. Okay, Richard, it was a pleasure talking with you. Okay, one last question. How often do you go back and change your old reports once you learn new, especially advanced techniques, or do you finish it and never go back and change old reports? This is the last question for today.
All right. When I'm with clients, usually so if they need some major update, then I would have to rebuild it, because all the time I learn something new and I would say, okay, that was stupid that I did. I could do much better. But usually I mean, I build it and it's there. But sometimes if I would have to build something new, then I completely incorporate the latest technology, the latest features that are there. So I will always try to raise the bar with every new report that I create.
All right, Richard. Thank you very much for joining. And
thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Yes, thank you.